The psychology of money. Morgan Housel. Have you ever wondered why two people living in the same country at the same time, with access to the same opportunities, can end up with completely different financial outcomes? While one builds a fortune, over the years, the other struggles to escape debt. The answer isn't found in the mathematical formulas you learn at school, nor in the complex spreadsheets of financial advisors. The secret lies much closer. It's in the mind. It's about how each person perceives and deals with money throughout life. This is exactly what Morgan Housel addresses in his book, The Psychology of Money. He shows us that the greatest factor determining financial success is not technical knowledge, but rather how we think, feel, and act in relation to money. Each person has a unique money story. From a very young age, we develop perceptions, beliefs, and emotions based on our personal experiences. Someone who grew up in scarcity, watching their parents struggle to pay bills, will likely adopt a much more conservative, risk-averse approach. On the other hand, those who grew up during times of economic prosperity, watching family members thrive through bold investments, may become more confident and risk-tolerant. That's why most financial advice is loaded with the personal history of the person giving it. Because money, before being about numbers, is deeply personal and emotional. Morgan Housel illustrates this with the example of John F. Kennedy. During the Great Depression of 1929, while millions of Americans lost jobs, homes, and life savings, the Kennedy family, already wealthy, continued to prosper. Their fortune was not only preserved but grew during that difficult decade. It was only years later, when Kennedy attended Harvard and studied the economic history of that period, that he truly grasped the suffering and tragedy that struck so many families. He had not lived through that trauma personally. This clearly shows that even within the same country, financial experiences can vary radically from person to person. These differences don't apply only to the rich and the poor. Children of unemployed farm workers and children of corporate executives not only grow up in entirely different worlds, but also develop opposing lessons about risk, safety, and reward. A young person who witnessed their parents lose everything in a financial crisis will likely feel uncomfortable investing aggressively in stocks, even if the data shows a favorable market. Conversely, someone who watched their parents grow wealthy through risky investments tends to view the market with much more optimism. Thus, the financial lessons we carry don't come from formulas or manuals, but from the concrete experiences that shape our journey. This is where many economic models fail to predict human behavior. Economists often create models based on a convenient fiction, the idea that humans are rational in their financial choices. But reality, as Morgan Housel demonstrates, is much messier. A clear example is the behavior of low-income families regarding lotteries. In the United States, a poor family spends an average of about $400 per year on lottery tickets. Ironically, these same families often struggle to come up with $400 for an emergency. From a rational perspective, this seems absurd, but emotionally, it makes sense. When trapped in a financial reality with no visible path to improvement, the lottery represents a tiny spark of hope, a slim chance to change one's life. These seemingly irrational behaviors are more common than we might think. Research by Henrik Malmendier and Stefan Nagel, which analyzed 50 years of American financial data, confirmed that personal experiences strongly shape risk attitudes. For example, if an investor lived through high inflation during youth, they tend to avoid fixed-interest financial instruments, even when inflation is currently under control. In contrast, those who experience stability feel more comfortable pursuing those same assets. The same applies to the stock market. If the market was booming during someone's formative years, they develop greater confidence in equities. But if the market was declining during that period, they may avoid stocks altogether later in life. This pattern explains why two people with the same technical knowledge and access to identical information can make completely opposite financial decisions. In the end, money doesn't strictly follow logic. It follows memories and emotions carried deep within each individual. Furthermore, we must recognize that we're all still learning how to handle money. Modern economic history is incredibly recent. The first coin emerged just over 2,600 years ago, during the reign of Alyattes in Lydia, present-day Turkey. Concepts like retirement, mortgages, personal credit, and capital markets are even more recent. Until the mid-20th century, for example, most Americans worked until they died because retirement, as we know it, was nearly unattainable. It was only after World War II, with the expansion of social security programs and rapid economic growth, that retirement became a real possibility for the masses. Mortgages, credit cards, and car loans only became widely accessible starting in the 1940s with the GI Bill, a benefits package for war veterans that boosted credit access and fueled the American economy. Even though we live in a seemingly sophisticated financial world, we are all still beginners in this grand game. That's why it's unfair to label people as incompetent in personal finance. In truth, we're all navigating a complex system with new rules, uncertain dynamics, and few solid historical references. And as we'll discover throughout this journey, beyond all these emotional variables, there's yet another powerful and often underestimated factor that directly influences our financial outcomes: luck. When it comes to money, it's impossible to ignore the role of luck. It operates silently, invisibly, and is often underestimated. Most of us prefer to believe that financial success is solely the result of hard work, discipline, and talent. And yes, hard work matters. But to deny the role of luck is to ignore one of the most unpredictable elements in personal finance. Morgan Housel shows how luck and chance shape entire careers. He shares the classic example of John D. Rockefeller, one of the most successful businessmen in history. Rockefeller built his oil empire at a time when US laws had no clear rules for what he was doing. His solution was simple and extremely risky. He completely ignored the law. If he had failed, he would have been just another convicted criminal. But because his plan succeeded, history celebrates him as a visionary and innovator. What separated a genius from a criminal in his case was an immeasurable element: luck. This same logic plays out daily in modern times. Many people admired for their wealth experienced a combination of hard work, smart decisions, but also the crucial factor of being in the right place at the right time. The problem arises when we try to copy these success stories as if they were guaranteed formulas. For wealth, the danger lies in over-romanticizing individual cases and failing to see how much randomness contributed to those outcomes. That's why Housel warns, we should seek broad common patterns, not extreme examples. When you study a single billionaire, you're analyzing an exception. When you study hundreds of stories of success and failure, you start identifying replicable patterns. Those are the patterns we should follow. Another dangerous enemy in personal finance is envy. It creates a destructive cycle of dissatisfaction. Imagine a rookie baseball player earning $500,000 a year. By most standards, he's already rich. But if he shares a locker room with a superstar earning $36 million a year, suddenly his own salary feels small. Envy makes him feel inadequate, even though he's objectively privileged. And the superstar, in turn, looks up to those earning even more, feeding an endless cycle of comparison. Morgan Housel illustrates this trap with the story of Rajat Gupta. Born in Kolkata, India, Gupta overcame extreme poverty and became CEO of McKinsey, one of the world's most prestigious consulting firms. When he retired, his fortune exceeded $100 million. Yet he still wanted more. During the 2008 financial crisis, after gaining insider knowledge of Warren Buffett's billion-dollar investments, Gupta passed on that information, execute illegal stock trades. In just minutes, he made millions. But the cost was immense. He was convicted and imprisoned for insider trading. His insatiable hunger for more led to his downfall. The lesson is clear. Knowing when to stop is one of the most valuable skills in finance. Additionally, Housel reminds us of another essential principle. Accumulating wealth is one thing. Keeping wealth is something entirely different. Earning money requires courage, ambition, and a willingness to take risks. But preserving wealth requires discipline, humility, and, above all, a healthy fear of losing what's been earned. The story of Jesse Livermore demonstrates this dynamic. He was one of Wall Street's greatest speculators in the early 20th century. In 1929, just before the stock market crash, Livermore made the biggest bet of his life. He shorted the market. He was right. When the crash hit, he earned the equivalent of billions in today's dollars. While many lost everything, he thrived. But his success led him to believe he was invincible. Livermore started taking increasingly bigger risks, convinced that his brilliance would shield him from future losses. Just a few years later, he lost everything, and, overwhelmed by debt and depression, took his own life. This tragic example teaches that the greatest financial danger arises when someone believes they can no longer fail. That's exactly when the risk of losing everything becomes real. Housel emphasizes that in finance, you must always respect randomness and remember that past success does not guarantee future victories. Another surprising statistic he shares: about 40% of all publicly traded companies eventually lose all their value over time. Even among America's billionaires, the Forbes 400 list rotates by about 20% per decade, excluding deaths and family transfers. Staying at the top is as difficult as getting there. Why does this happen? Because maintaining wealth requires a rare mindset. It demands the ability to walk away from tempting opportunities, reject unnecessary risks, and protect what has already been earned. When you fear losing, you evaluate each opportunity much more critically. Few gains are large enough to justify risking everything. Housel concludes that financial success doesn't come from always being right, but from getting a few big things right and protecting those gains. Even if you fail in half your decisions, a few major wins can offset many small losses. To illustrate this, he tells the story of Heinz Berggruen, one of the world's greatest art collectors. Berggruen had no formal education in finance or business. He began his collection by buying small artworks for modest amounts, like a watercolor by Paul Klee for $100. Over time, he acquired a vast collection, including pieces from renowned artists like Picasso, Matisse, and Braque. Some of these became extraordinary investments, while others yielded little return. His secret was simple: diversify, accumulate, and let time turn a few choices into big wins. This principle applies equally to financial investing. A few big winners can compensate for a series of small mistakes. Failure is inevitable, but what truly matters is the nature of your wins. Finally, Housel leaves us with valuable advice. Be extremely cautious about who you admire and who you try to imitate. Studying individual cases can be dangerous because we tend to idolize extreme examples. Instead, focus on identifying timeless principles that work across generations and situations. In the end, the great lesson of the psychology of money is that money doesn't follow cold, predictable logic. It's governed by emotions, experiences, luck, and psychological decisions that we often can't fully control. That's why recognizing luck's role, developing a healthy fear of loss, and protecting your gains, rather than constantly chasing more, may be the safest and most sustainable path to building lasting wealth. At the conclusion of this journey, it's clear that the greatest challenge with money isn't understanding markets, reading charts, or following formulas. The real challenge lies within ourselves. Our life stories, past experiences, fears, and desires shape the financial decisions we make every day. Often, we believe that studying investments, following economic news, or listening to experts will teach us all we need. But as Housel shows, behind every financial choice lies deep emotion. There's luck that can lift us or crush us. There are invisible risks we ignore when overconfident. There's envy that pushes us to want more, even when we already have enough. Above all, there's the need to recognize our own limits and know when to stop. Accumulating wealth requires courage. Keeping wealth requires wisdom. And much of that wisdom comes from the humility to recognize we don't have complete control. We don't need to always be right. We need to protect the wins when they happen and avoid risking everything in pursuit of more. That's the true psychology of money. So as you build your financial path, focus on recognizing the common patterns that repeat across countless successful stories. Don't be deceived by extreme examples. Don't try to mimic isolated success stories. Study the timeless principles that continue to work regardless of the era. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You are already many steps ahead of most because you now understand that in the game of money, what matters most is not how much you know about numbers, but how well you know yourself. And if you enjoyed this optimized summary, don't forget to subscribe, leave your like, and hit the notification bell. That way, you'll keep receiving more content like this, with practical, direct, and applicable teachings for your financial and personal growth. Here, you learn fast, with depth, and always in an optimized way.